the sky cracked open with the roar of fire and thunder, a sound so deep it shook the bones of the living and whispered death to the dead. On the horizon, a figure descended, faster than any arrow or falling stone could hope to strike. Cloaked in blue and red, his eyes burned with a heat that rivaled dragonfire, his fists clenched with the weight of a world far from his own. Westeros, a land of swords, betrayal, and ambition, was about to meet a force it could neither comprehend nor control. And in that moment, the kingdoms did not know whether to fear him, revere him, or pray for mercy. But one thing was certain: the Game of Thrones had changed forever. Winterfell's winds howled like a chorus of ghosts, carrying the scent of snow, smoke, and blood. Jon Snow stood atop the walls, staring at the sky as the clouds twisted unnaturally, darkening with a presence that was not of their world. He had fought the dead, outlasted the undead, and faced betrayal that cut deeper than any sword, but nothing, not even the Night King, had prepared him for this. The ground trembled beneath the hooves of dragons, but this time the tremor was not theirs. It was heavier, steadier, omnipresent. Villagers fled screaming as birds scattered from the trees, their wings beating frantic messages to the heavens. And in the silence that followed the storm's first warning, a singular voice carried deep, resonant, and terrifyingly calm. "I am here to stop the war," it said. The voice had no accent, no hint of the Seven Kingdoms, yet it carried an authority no king or queen could command. The people below looked up in awe and fear. A man or something more than a man descended, and for the first time, Westeros saw what it truly meant to confront a god. And as he landed, the snow beneath him melted in arcs of heat, steam rising like the smoke of 1,000 torches. Crows scattered from the walls, dragons roared from the skies, and swords clanged against shields not in challenge, but an instinctual defense against the impossible. A new player had entered the game, and the stakes had become eternal. In the shadow of this arrival, whispers spread faster than wildfire. Some called him a savior, others a harbinger of doom. And yet, the true question remained unspoken, lingering in the hearts of kings, lords, and small folk alike. Could a being of such power bend to the politics and cruelty of men, or would he destroy it all in pursuit of justice, a justice Westeros had never known? The icy winds of the north carried more than cold, they carried warning. Jon Snow turned to his sister Arya, her eyes sharp, ever aware. "He's not like any enemy we've faced," Jon said, his voice low, taut with uncertainty. Arya's hand brushed Needle's hilt. "I'm not like any friend either," she replied. "We can't trust him. Not yet." Far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister peered down from the Red Keep, her fingers curling around the stone balustrade. Rumors of a god among men had reached even her ears, and for the first time she felt an unfamiliar prickle of fear, not for her life, not for her throne, but for the legacy she had meticulously carved. A man who could end her power with a thought, a gesture, a blink. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen tightened her grip on Drogon's reins, sensing the tremors in the world that even her dragons could not explain. Another presence had arrived, one that could rival fire with fire, strength with strength, and in her heart an uneasy feeling blossomed. Was this savior or challenger? The Game of Thrones had always been brutal, bloody, and personal. Alliances were fleeting, loyalty fragile, and ambition deadly. But now, a force beyond their comprehension had entered the board. The question was no longer who would sit on the Iron Throne, but whether the throne, the kingdoms, and the people of Westeros would survive at all. Far above the mountains, on a frozen cliff overlooking the wall, Superman observed quietly. He had arrived through a tear in reality, a world unrecognizable in its cruelty and its beauty. The sky was heavier here, the sun colder, and yet the weight of injustice struck him as profoundly as ever. A world crying out for protection, yet mired in cycles of violence that even his strength could not instantly correct. He could fly across armies, extinguish dragons with a thought, shatter weapons with a flick of a finger. And yet, he paused. The men and women of this world, so small, yet so dangerous, demanded understanding before action. For the first time, he felt the tension of restraint, a challenge far greater than mere power, the challenge of humanity itself. And so, his first decision was one that would ripple across the lands, intervene directly, bending the world to his sense of right. Or watch, learn, and step only when the balance tipped beyond repair. The very nature of Westeros seemed to whisper at him, a world where heroes die, kings betray, and dragons burn more than cities, they burn souls. As the wind howled and snow fell around him, Superman knew this. He had entered a game far older, darker, and infinitely more dangerous than any he had ever known. And every step, every action, would carry consequences far beyond imagination. The first encounter came sooner than anyone expected. Beyond the walls of Winterfell, in the frozen forests where the snow lay thick and the trees groaned under ice, Jon Snow and his companions moved cautiously. The rumor of a stranger with impossible strength had reached even the farthest scouts. And now, that stranger had shown himself. A village lay in ruin, houses splintered, smoke rising from chimneys long since consumed by fire. Survivors huddled in the snow, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. Jon's hand instinctively went to Longclaw, though he knew the weapon was almost meaningless against what had struck here. And then, from the mist, a figure appeared. Not walking, not running, descending from the clouds like a force of nature itself. "Stand down," the figure said, voice calm yet authoritative. The villagers flinched. Jon stepped forward, raising long claw as a warning. "Who are you? What are you?" "I am here to stop what is coming," the man replied. His eyes, glowing faintly, scanned the surrounding forest as if he could see through time and space itself. "I have seen war. I have seen death. I will not let it continue unchecked." Arya tightened her grip on Needle. "Words mean nothing here," she said. "Actions define a man or a monster." Before Jon could respond, a shadow fell over the trees. Drogon, Daenerys' dragon, landed with a thunderous roar, wings spreading wide and casting darkness over the snow. His scales shimmered like molten night, fire licking the edges of his mouth. Jon and Arya instinctively stepped back, but Superman remained still, his gaze locked on the dragon. "You are not the enemy," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. The dragon's eyes, fierce and intelligent, seemed to judge him. And then, a curious thing happened. Drogon tilted his head, studying the newcomer. There was a moment of silence, a tension so thick it pressed on the chest. And then the dragon bowed its massive head slightly, acknowledging a presence it did not fear. Jon's brow furrowed. "You?" controlled the dragon. Superman shook his head. "No, but I can command no force here, not yet. Trust is earned, not taken." In that frozen forest, the first fragile alliance began to form, not of loyalty, but of necessity. Westeros had never seen such a being, one who combined strength beyond imagination with restraint beyond belief. And as the wind howled around them, Jon understood something crucial. Power alone did not guarantee victory. Judgment, wisdom, and timing mattered even more. Meanwhile, far to the south, Cersei Lannister convened her council. Word had reached King's Landing of the stranger, the godlike man who had appeared in the north, unchallenged and unhurt by the harshest elements of their world. Her advisors whispered in fear, their words laced with superstition and doubt. "Dragons are not enough," Cersei said, her voice cold and sharp. "The 7 kingdoms have never faced this. If we are to survive, we must strike first." Qyburn, ever loyal yet calculating, suggested more sinister methods, perhaps. Weapons beyond swords, artifacts of dark sorcery, poisons unknown. Even a god can bleed. Cersei's eyes gleamed. "Then prepare them. And if this man comes to claim the throne, he will find the Iron Throne defended by more than men." Across the narrow sea, Daenerys watched the north with a storm in her eyes. She did not know this newcomer, yet she sensed his intentions were noble. Still, trust was a luxury she could not afford. Her dragons were her strength, her lineage, her claim. But even she could not ignore a force capable of rivaling fire with pure will. Superman, meanwhile, moved through the north like a shadow of hope and fear intertwined. He healed the injured with gentle touches, rebuilt what the wind and snow had destroyed, and protected the weak without ever asserting dominance over the living. Yet with each act of mercy, whispers grew louder. Some called him savior, others demon, and beneath it all, a deeper tension simmered. Westeros thrived on chaos, manipulation, and power struggles. A being who sought only to prevent suffering threatened the very foundation of their world. Every lord, every king, every queen began to wonder, could humanity accept a force that did not bend to ambition, greed, or fear? High above, the clouds shifted. and the first real storm came. Not of snow, not of fire, but of destiny. A force older than dragons, deeper than ice, and darker than betrayal stirred in the shadows, watching the man who walked among mortals and yet transcended them. The game had changed, and the pieces were moving. The storm rolled over the north like an angry god, black clouds blotting out the weak winter sun. Jon Snow stood on the battlements of Winterfell, staring toward the horizon where the impossible man, this Superman, had disappeared into the snow-laden forests. Reports from scouts spoke of impossible feats. Wolves saved from traps, villages rebuilt in hours, snow melted in paths where no flame could reach. The people whispered his name in awe and fear, calling him the man who commands the sky. Yet even as they celebrated, a deeper unease settled in Jon's chest. Power without limits was frightening. He knew the north, the people, and the dangers that lurked beyond the wall end. He also knew that no amount of strength could fix what had been broken in the hearts of men. Arya approached silently, needle in hand, eyes sharp as ice. "He does not belong here," she said. "He may mean well, but the people of this world, they are not ready for him. Neither are the lords. We could all end up destroyed by him, even if he never intends it." Jon shook his head, worry pressing into his features. Maybe this world has never needed someone like him, and maybe that's exactly why he's here. But how do we trust someone who could wipe out armies without even thinking? Far to the south, King's Landing was a hive of paranoia. Cersei paced the halls of the Red Keep, her mind spinning schemes darker than any fire she had unleashed before. Reports of the stranger's actions in the north had reached her ears, and each detail sent a shiver down her spine. "They say he saves people," Cersei whispered to Qyburn, voice sharp and laced with disbelief. "And yet, who among us would dare stand against him?" Qyburn's fingers drummed on the table, calculating, cold. A direct confrontation would be disastrous. But subtlety, Your Grace, subtlety could sway fate even against gods. Cersei's eyes narrowed. "Then prepare. Every poison, every spell, every weapon we can muster. If he comes to take the Iron Throne, he will find it defended by more than mere steel." Across the narrow sea, Daenerys and her dragons circled above the icy waters. Drogon and Rhaegal's wings sliced through the wind as Daenerys observed the northern lands below. She sensed the arrival of Superman not as a threat, but as a force beyond mortal ambition, a force that could rival even dragons in power. And that frightened her. "He could destroy us," she murmured, tightening her grip on Dragon's reins. "Or he could save us, but I will not be a bystander in my own destiny." Meanwhile, in the northern forests, Superman moved quietly among the people. He had learned to temper his presence, to allow humanity to retain some semblance of agency, even as he protected them from the harshest threats. Yet the tension was palpable. He felt the fear, the awe, the suspicion, and the fragile hope that clung to the hearts of men. One night, Jon and Arya found him standing atop a snow-covered ridge, watching the horizon. His cape fluttered like a shadow against the moonlight, his eyes scanning the lands far beyond human reach. "You do not belong here?" Jon said, finally breaking the silence. "Your power, it frightens people, even the good ones." Superman turned, his expression calm yet somber. "I did not come to frighten, I came to protect. But this world, it is not easy to save. Strength is meaningless if it cannot change hearts." Arya's voice was sharp. "And if the hearts of men cannot change, what then?" Superman's gaze softened, looking toward the distant mountains where dragons roamed and kings schemed. "Then I will endure. I will protect, even if they do not understand me. But I cannot do it alone." Far to the east, whispers of this impossible being reached the ears of those who thrived in shadow. Assassins, spies, and mercenaries spoke of him in hushed tones. Some sought to test him, others to kill him, and a few more foolish than wise sought to bargain with him. But no scheme, no weapon, no blade could touch him. And that fact alone began to shift the delicate balance of power across Westeros. A presence even older than dragons stirred. In the crypts beneath Winterfell, the old gods whispered of the man from another world. They sensed his arrival, not as a threat, but as a harbinger, someone who could tip the scales of destiny in ways no mortal or immortal had yet comprehended. And high above the world, as snow fell and the wind screamed, Superman understood the truth he had already suspected. To protect this land, he must confront not only its monsters, but the hearts of the people themselves. A war of ideology, ambition, and morality awaited. And in Westeros, that war could be as deadly as any sword, as consuming as any fire, and as eternal as the cold, unforgiving night. The first night in this strange land ended quietly, but the calm was a lie. Across the north, eyes watched from the shadows, calculating, waiting. Forces both human and inhuman were already aligning. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of men, a shadow smiled because the game had changed, and the pieces were moving in ways no one yet understood. The morning sun broke over Winterfell, casting long, cold shadows across the snow-covered walls. Superman stood silently at the edge of the courtyard, observing the small folk go about their cautious routines. Children laughed, unaware of the power that now watched over them. Farmers shoveled snow with stiff backs, hoping their toil mattered in a world ruled by lords, dragons, and war. Yet even here, in this quiet moment, tension coiled like a snake ready to strike. Jon Snow approached, boots crunching in the snow, long claw at his side. "You're not like any fighter I've known," Jon said, voice low. "You could destroy armies without blinking, and yet you choose restraint." Superman's eyes softened as he watched the villagers. "Power without responsibility is meaningless. I could wipe out armies, burn cities, and end kings in moments, but that would not protect anyone. It would only create new enemies." Arya stepped forward, her needle glinting in the morning light. "And yet," she said, voice sharp, "the lords will fear you. The kings will scheme. People die here for less. How long before they see your restraint as weakness?" Superman looked north, toward the wall where winter never truly ended. "Then I will show them that strength can protect without conquering. That courage can exist without cruelty, but it will take time and patience." Meanwhile, far to the south, Cersei Lannister's paranoia grew like a living thing. She had convened her council in secret, shadows flickering in the torchlight. Maps were spread across tables, war plans drawn with sharp ink lines. Every word from her spies carried reports of Superman's Dietz villagers saved, wolves protected, towns rebuilt. "He is not human," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "No man, no dragon, no army can be allowed to exist in this world unchecked." Qyburn leaned close, a calculating gleam in his eyes. "Then we must be clever, Your Grace. Magic, poison, trickery. The world's cruelty has shaped kings for centuries. Perhaps it can shape him too." Cersei's lips curved in a cold smile. "Then prepare, and when he comes, Westeros will show him that even gods must obey its rules." Across the narrow sea, Daenerys watched the north with stormy eyes. Dragons circled above her, wings slicing the wind, talons gripping the clouds. She knew that Superman's presence would alter the balance of power, not just in Westeros, but in her destiny as a Targaryen. "He could rival us," she whispered to herself, "or he could unite us. But trust is a currency I cannot afford." In the north, Superman faced his first true moral dilemma. Scouts reported a band of raiders attacking a small village, burning homes, killing innocents. With a mere thought, he could obliterate them in an instant. But Jon Snow's voice echoed in his mind. Restraint, patience, protect, but do not dominate. Flying low, faster than the wind, he intercepted the raiders. The leader swung a sword, but it shattered against an invisible force. The men froze, terror spreading across their faces. Superman did not strike. He simply hovered, watching. "Leave this place," he said quietly, his voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Harm no one again." The men fled, trembling, leaving behind smoke, blood, and terror but not life. Superman landed, helping survivors from the rubble, healing burns and cuts with a gentle touch. The villagers stared in awe, unsure whether to worship him or fear him. That night, Jon and Arya discussed the events by the fire. "You're changing them," Arya said, watching the flames dance. "Not by force, but by example. They'll either follow him, or try to destroy him." Jon's jaw tightened. "And if they choose destruction, Cersei will not hesitate, neither will others. The Iron Throne cannot be shared with a god." High above, clouds twisted unnaturally. Something ancient stirred, sensing a force that defied the natural order. In the shadow of the mountains, creatures older than dragons, remnants of magic long thought dead, watched Superman with curiosity and hunger. Even as he rested, He knew the trials ahead would not come solely from men. Westeros itself, alive with ancient power, would test him. The forests, mountains, and seas held secrets and dangers that even his extraordinary senses could not fully predict. And as the night deepened, whispers spread among the lords of the north, rumors of a man with power beyond comprehension. Some spoke of hope, some of doom, but one thought united them all. The game had changed. The pieces had shifted, and no strategy, no alliance, could predict the moves of a being who existed beyond ambition, beyond fear, beyond death itself. Far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei smiled at the thought. "Let him come," she whispered. "He may have power, but Westeros has cunning, and cunning has survived longer than gods." The wind howled across the frozen plains beyond Winterfell, carrying with it the scent of smoke, snow, and anticipation. Superman hovered above the forests, eyes scanning for signs of trouble. His presence had already begun to ripple across the realm, reaching ears and hearts he had not yet met. Lords whispered his name in fear, small folk in awe, and warriors in disbelief. Yet even in this world of steel and fire, he understood that might alone would not bring peace. Jon Snow approached cautiously, riding ghosts at his side. "There's news from the south," he said. "Cersei, she's mobilizing her armies. She sees you as a threat." Superman's gaze darkened, scanning the horizon where mountains met clouds. "And she would be right to fear me," he said, voice low. "But fear alone will not guide her or anyone else to the right path." Arya joined them, eyes sharp as blades. "You can't fight everyone," she said. "Even dragons will obey her if she commands them wisely. You have to be careful. This world, it eats those who think they can protect it by force." Superman nodded, understanding the delicate balance he faced. A single misstep could ignite war across continents, even between beings who did not yet understand one another. "Then I must learn who can be guided and who must be left to face their own choices." Far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei moved like a shadow through the Red Keep. Her spies whispered of the stranger's actions. Villagers healed. Raiders turned away without a drop of blood. She clenched her fists, a mix of fear and fascination crossing her face. "He is not just a man," she muttered to Qyburn. "He is a weapon we cannot touch, unless we are clever enough to bend him to our rules." Qyburn's fingers drummed. Across the table, calculating. "There are ways, Your Grace," he said. "Even gods can be challenged. All it takes is cunning, patience, and the right moment." Across the narrow sea, Daenerys watched the shifting clouds in the north. Her dragons circled above her, wings slicing the wind like sharpened knives. She felt a power rising, one that could rival fire and blood alike. Her heart wavered between fear and curiosity. "He could rival the old world," she whispered, "or he could save it. But can I trust someone so absolute?" Meanwhile, Superman moved through the forests, quietly observing the small folk and the soldiers alike. He healed the wounded, rebuilt what had been destroyed, and offered protection without taking dominion. And with every act of mercy, he began to understand the true challenge of Westeros, that even good intentions could spark fear, rebellion, and betrayal. A sudden cry pierced the air. Jon, Arya, and Superman raced toward a clearing where bandits were cornering a merchant caravan. Superman arrived first, moving with blinding speed. With a motion of his hand, swords shattered, wheels splintered, and the attackers froze in terror. "Leave this place," he said, voice calm yet commanding. "Harm no one again." The bandits fled into the trees, broken and terrified, leaving survivors stunned but unharmed. Jon and Arya watched, a mix of awe and unease on their faces. "He saves them without killing," Arya said quietly, "and yet, that makes him a target. Men like Cersei cannot understand mercy, they only understand power." Superman looked north, toward the wall and beyond. He sensed the looming threat not just from men, but from forces older and darker than anything Westeros had seen. The Night King may have been gone, but the whispers of the old powers still lingered. And now, with him in this world, the balance had shifted. That night, as Winterfell slept under a thick blanket of snow, Superman stood atop the walls, looking out across the land. He could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation, and the fear. Westeros was a chessboard, and he had become an unmovable piece, one that could save or destroy with a single action. Then somewhere in the shadows, far to the south, Cersei smiled. "Let him come," she whispered. "He may be strong. But Westeros has survived stronger men than gods." High above the mountains, ancient eyes watched. Which forces older than dragons, older than the Seven Kingdoms, stirred in the wind and snow? They had sensed the arrival of something impossible, a man from another world, a force of pure justice and power. And as they stirred, the true challenge of Superman's presence became clear. Survival in Westeros would require more than strength. It would demand understanding, patience, and the willingness to confront darkness in ways no hero ever had before. The first real test of Superman's influence came not from armies or dragons, but from betrayal, the kind that Westeros cultivated like a dark art. Word had spread of his deeds in the north, and not all were pleased. Lords, knights, and mercenaries alike feared the presence of a man who could end life with a thought yet chose mercy instead. At Winterfell, Jon and Arya convened with a council of northern lords. Their faces were lined with age, battle, and suspicion. The conversation quickly turned to Superman. "He is no man of the north," Lord Manderley said, voice gruff. "We do not know his motives. He could save us, or destroy us, just as Isserley." Jon's hand rested on Longclaw. "He has saved lives. He has protected our people. That is proof of his intentions." A murmur rose from the lords. Some nodded, hearts relieved. Others frowned, unable to trust what they could not control. And yet, Lord Karstark said, "A power like that in our midst will draw enemies like vultures to carrion. How long before the South or the dragons come to claim him or kill him?" Superman stood silently, listening. His presence alone shifted the room's energy, a calm authority that spoke louder than any sword. And yet, he knew the truth. Trust in Westeros was as fragile as ice over fire. Far to the south, Cersei's machinations began in earnest. She sent envoys, spies, and assassins to test his limits. Each attempt failed, sometimes spectacularly. Men who sought to harm him were frozen mid-step, their weapons shattering, their hearts racing with fear. Whispered rumors of a god among men reached the Red Keep, but rather than dampening her resolve, it fueled her obsession. "He is not infallible," Qyburn whispered, leaning close. "Even gods have vulnerabilities. It is only a matter of finding them." Cersei's eyes glinted with cruel determination. "Then find them, and when you do, he will kneel, or he will die." Meanwhile, Daenerys considered her position. From the skies above the narrow sea, she observed the northern lands, dragons circling with wings, slicing the clouds. The presence of Superman complicated everything. She had built alliances, ambitions, even her sense of destiny. He could rival dragons, she said to herself. Or he could guide them. But which will it be, friend or enemy? Superman, however, faced a quieter, more insidious challenge. Among the small folk, hope and fear mingled in equal measure. Villagers who had once prayed to the old gods now whispered of a man who walked like the sky itself. And with admiration came envy, suspicion, and treachery. One evening, as he flew over a northern village, he sensed danger, a trap set not with steel or fire, but with human greed and cunning. A band of knights, bribed and ambitious, had conspired to capture him, hoping to claim reward or power. Superman descended quietly, their horses stamping in the snow, swords drawn. The knights advanced, thinking their numbers gave them advantage. But in an instant, their weapons froze mid-air, their breaths caught in terror. Superman's eyes glowed faintly, not with anger, but with inevitability. "Leave," he said softly. Yet every word carried the weight of 1,000 judgments. Harm no one again. The knights fled, their hearts pounding with disbelief. They had faced armies, dragons, and storms, but nothing had prepared them for mercy so absolute it became a weapon in itself. That night, Jon and Arya discussed the day's events by the fire. "He changes everything," Jon said. "Not because he fights, but because he doesn't. And that terrifies those who rely on fear to control people." Arya's eyes glinted. "Fear or hope. It can be dangerous either way. Westeros has survived countless tyrants, yet it may not survive someone who shows mercy where none existed before." Far to the south, Cersei's resolve hardened. She had watched reports of Superman's actions, each act of protection fueling both respect and obsession. If the North and the dragons refused to stop him, she would. And her cunning was as dangerous as any army or dragon. High above, in the icy mountains and shadowed forests, forces older than men stirred. Creatures whispered in ancient tongues, sensing the arrival of a being who could challenge the natural order. Dragons, wolves, and spirits alike watched him, curious, wary, and calculating. Superman stood atop a ridge, looking across the snow-covered lands. He could feel the tension, the fear, the hope, the ambition, and the betrayal all colliding in a world not his own. Westeros would test him, not with brute force alone, but with the very essence of its people. And he knew this. To survive, to protect, to save this land, he would have to navigate not just battles of strength, but battles of heart and mind, choices and consequences that no hero from his world had ever faced. The Game of Thrones had grown infinitely more complex, and in its shadows, a storm was coming, one that would not be held back by steel, fire, or even dragons. The first sign of open conflict came in the Riverlands, where whispers of Superman had reached both rebel lords and loyalists. Soldiers reported impossible sightings, a man in blue and red intervening in skirmishes, disarming armies with a gesture, and protecting villagers without bloodshed. Fear spread faster than wildfire, even among hardened knights. Jon Snow arrived, with his companions, seeking to understand the true impact of this mysterious savior. The villagers' eyes widened with relief and suspicion as he landed before them, calm and commanding. "You saved my family," an old woman whispered, clutching a child to her chest. "But who are you?" "I am here to protect," Superman replied softly. "Not to rule, not to take what is not mine, only to ensure no more innocent lives are lost." The villagers nodded in awe, yet Jon could see the unease in their eyes. Even in relief, there was fear. Power, so absolute, exercised with restraint, was unfamiliar and dangerous in a world shaped by betrayal and blood. Far to the south, Cersei's plans advanced. She had begun to forge alliances with mercenaries and sorcerers, dark forces long hidden from sight. Poison, spells, and scheming hands were her weapons, designed not to confront Superman's strength directly, but to test the limits of his patience and judgment. "He cannot be allowed to act freely," she said to Kyber. "If he touches the Iron Throne, he changes everything. Westeros cannot survive an outsider who refuses its rules." Qyburn smiled coldly. "Then we shall bend him or destroy him, Your Grace, one way or another. The game continues." Meanwhile, Daenerys plotted from her ship near Dragoonstone. She could sense the northern lands shifting under a new power, a force that could rival fire and blood alike. Her dragons sensed it too, restless and uneasy in the skies. "He's not like any man I've faced," she whispered, voice heavy with thought. "He could rival dragons, and yet he does not seek domination. But trust is a luxury I cannot afford." In the north, Superman faced a test of morality unlike any before. A village was threatened by both wildlings and rogue mercenaries, each driven by hunger, fear, or ambition. He could stop them in an instant, but Jon warned him, "Intervene, yes, but remember, we cannot fight the will of men with force alone." Superman hovered above the battlefield, calm and deliberate. Swords shattered mid-air, arrows bent like reeds in the wind, and the aggressors froze in shock. "Leave this place," he said, voice steady and unyielding. "Harm no one again." The men fled, broken and terrified. Jon and Arya watched, understanding what they were witnessing. The power to save without destroying, to enforce justice without cruelty, was terrifying precisely because it did not belong to the world they knew. That night, Jon stood by the walls of Winterfell, looking north toward the icy forests. "This world has never seen someone like him," he said. "Even the dead never inspired fear and hope at the same time." Arya's gaze was sharp. "He changes the rules, but the question is, can the world survive someone who does not play by its rules?" Far to the south, Cersei sharpened her dagger, her mind weaving plans darker than any fire she had ever unleashed. "I will not be ignored," she whispered. "Not by a god, not by dragons, and not by anyone who thinks Westeros can be saved without paying the price I have always known." High above, ancient forces stirred. The winds of magic, the remnants of dragons, and creatures older than men, watched Superman with a mixture of curiosity, calculation, and hunger. Westeros itself was awakening, sensing the arrival of someone who could bend the very essence of power, hope, and fear to his will, or refuse it entirely. Superman stood alone atop a frozen ridge, staring across the snow and forests. understanding, the truth he had always suspected. In Westeros, power alone was not enough. To protect this land, he would need to navigate not just battles of strength, but battles of morality, loyalty, and the fragile hearts of mortals. And every choice he made would ripple across kingdoms, shaping destinies in ways no hero from his world had ever faced. The Game of Thrones had a new player, one who did not seek a crown, yet could change the fate of every kingdom, dragon, and soul in its path. And in the shadows, both human and ancient eyes watched, waiting, plotting, and calculating their first move. Winter deepened across the north, blanketing the forests and villages in silence. But silence in Westeros was never truly peace. Word of Superman's presence had spread far and wide, reaching ears both loyal and treacherous. Fear and fascination walked hand in hand, threading through the halls of Winterfell and beyond. Jon Snow rode through the village outskirts, observing the cautious activity of the villagers. Farmers worked with renewed vigor, yet eyes darted skyward, ever watchful. Children played where streets had been destroyed by war, their laughter tentative, tinged with awe. And above it all, a shadow of vigilance hovered. Superman, scanning the horizon for threats, guiding, protecting, intervening where necessary, yet never dominating. Arya watched from a nearby ridge, needle gleaming in the pale sunlight. "You think they understand what he truly is?" she asked Jon. Jon shook his head. "I don't think any of us can. Not yet. And that is the danger. Fear of the unknown can kill even the bravest hearts." Far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei's obsession grew. Every report of Superman's deeds seemed to fuel both her fascination and paranoia. She had begun to imagine him as a rival king, a god who could unseat her without a single blade. "Even dragons bow to no one," she whispered to Qyburn. "Yet this man, he saves without command. That is unacceptable. He must be stopped." Qyburn's mind raced, calculating, analyzing, plotting. "There are ways," he said softly. "Even a god can be tempted, manipulated, or forced into a corner. Patience is the weapon we need." Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen considered her own strategy. She watched the northern lands, with dragons circling overhead, restless. The presence of Superman complicated her ambitions. Someone of such power could rival fire, blood, and claim. Yet his restraint puzzled her. "He could be an ally," she mused aloud. "Or he could be the challenge I have always feared. But he is not one to bend." Meanwhile, in the north, Superman faced a dilemma that tested more than tested judgment. A band of outlaws had seized a small stronghold, terrorizing villagers. Jon and Arya urged caution. He could end the threat in an instant, but Westeros demanded more than force. It demanded morality, restraint, understanding. Superman descended quietly, standing in the courtyard, his presence alone halting the outlaws in mid-step. "Leave this place," he said. "Harm no one again." The men fled, broken in spirit, bewildered by a power they could not harm and could not understand. Jon and Arya watched silently, comprehending that this form of intervention, mercy, combined with authority, was altering Westeros more profoundly than any sword or dragon ever could. That evening, atop the walls of Winterfell, Jon spoke quietly. "To Arya, this changes everything, not just the north. All of Westeros' men, women, kings, and queens will have to rethink everything they know about power." Arya's eyes were sharp, calculating, and that terrifies them. "That's why someone like Cersei will stop at nothing, because she cannot control him, and Westeros cannot accept someone they cannot dominate." High above the wall, ancient forces stirred. The spirits of the old gods, remnants of magic, and creatures older than dragons observed Superman. They sensed a being who defied the natural order, a force capable of reshaping destiny itself. And in their whispers, the first shadows of challenge began to form, watching for the slightest misstep. Superman stood alone atop the icy cliffs, feeling the weight of a world not his own pressing down. Every life, every decision, every act of mercy would ripple across kingdoms, dragons, and hearts alike. He knew the task was far greater than mere battle. It was the challenge of guiding humanity without dominating it, of protecting without ruling it, of being a savior in a world that feared salvation. And far to the south, the pieces were moving. Cersei, Daenerys, and countless others watched, planned, and waited. The Game of Thrones had changed, and with a player who refused to bend, the outcome was uncertain. Every choice, every moment, would decide not just the fate of men, but the fate of Westeros itself. His storm was coming, and it would not be held back by fire, steel, or even dragons. The North had grown restless. Whispers of Superman's deeds traveled faster than snowstorms across the frozen lands. Villagers told tales of a man who could move faster than the eye, heal wounds with a touch, and turn away those who sought to harm the innocent without lifting a sword. The legend spread like wildfire, bringing hope to some and terror to others. Jon Snow rode alongside Superman through the forests, cautious yet curious. "The lords of the North respect your strength," Jon said, "but they fear what they cannot control. And you cannot be controlled." Superman's gaze was fixed on the horizon. "I am not here to rule, Jan. I am here to protect, but the hearts of men. They are fragile, filled with ambition, fear, and greed. Even the best intentions can ignite war if not tempered by understanding." Arya, moving silently beside them, observed both men. "And some hearts cannot be tempered," she said. "Some must be confronted. The North will test you, and so will the South. Every choice you make will ripple farther than you know." Far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei sharpened her daggers and her resolve. Reports of Superman's actions arrived daily, each tale a threat to her authority. She saw him not only as a challenge but as an omen, a man who could render kings, dragons, and armies powerless without striking a single blow. "He cannot be allowed to touch the Iron Throne," she said to Qyburn. "He bends the rules we live by, and Westeros cannot survive that." Qyburn's eyes glimmered with calculation. "Patience, Your Grace. Even a god can be manipulated. We need only find the right leverage, the right moment. Then the impossible becomes achievable." Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen felt the pull of change in the winds. She watched the northern lands, dragons restless above her. The presence of Superman complicated everything she had planned. Her destiny intertwined with fire and blood. "He could rival dragons," she whispered, "or he could unite them. But which will it be, ally or threat?" In the North, Superman's next challenge tested not brute strength, but morality. Scouts reported that a mercenary army had taken hostages in a nearby village, demanding ransom from families who could barely feed themselves. Jon urged caution, while Arya's instincts screamed action. Superman approached quietly, standing before the mercenaries. Swords shook in their hands, arrows trembling midair, and even hardened men froze, unsure of how to confront a force they could not harm. "Leave," Superman commanded. "Harm no one again." The men fled, terror etched into their faces. Jon and Arya watched, understanding the extraordinary balance he maintained: power without domination, authority without cruelty. In a world defined by betrayal and bloodshed, his presence was a force as unpredictable as it was transformative. But that night, atop Winterfell's walls, Jon spoke in a low voice. "This world has never seen someone like him. Even the dead never." Inspired hope and fear at the same time. Arya's eyes narrowed. "And that is why Cersei will stop at nothing. Because he cannot be controlled. And Westeros cannot accept a savior they cannot dominate." High above, ancient forces stirred in the icy mountains and forests. The whispers of old gods, remnants of ancient magic, and creatures older than dragons watched Superman with both curiosity and caution. He had entered their world not as a conqueror, but as a guardian, and in doing so, it shifted the delicate balance of power. Superman's presence alone had created a ripple of change. Every kingdom, dragon, and mortal in Westeros now faced a new reality. A force beyond comprehension, a man who could reshape destiny without killing, and a challenge that no one could fully anticipate. Far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei's obsession deepened. Daenerys' curiosity hardened, and the North held its breath. The Game of Thrones had entered a new era, one where the rules no longer applied, and the outcome rested not on steel, fire, or blood but on choices, morality, and the hearts of men. The storm was coming, unstoppable, and it would demand more than strength to survive. Winter's grip tightened across the north, the wind cutting like knives and snow piling high against the walls of winter. Yet the cold did not touch the warmth. Superman carried a warmth not of fire, but of hope. Small folk whispered his name in awe, warriors watched in disbelief, and lords debated his influence. Fearful and fascinated in equal measure, Jon Snow. He stood with him atop the battlements, the wall looming in the distance, a jagged reminder of dangers older than men. "They fear you," Jon said quietly, "not your strength, but your restraint. That terrifies those who have built kingdoms on betrayal and death." Superman's gaze swept over the snow-laden lands. "Mercy is a weapon more powerful than any blade or dragon," he said. "But Westeros, it is not accustomed to such a weapon, and that will be the challenge." Arya joined them, eyes sharp, her blade resting lightly at her side. "You'll face more than armies. You'll face fear, envy, and treachery. Every lord, every queen, every king will try to bend you or destroy you." Far to the south, Cersei Lannister moved her pieces in shadow. Plans were drawn in secret chambers, poisons brewed, spies dispatched. Each act aimed not to confront Superman's strength, but to test his limits, to find the weakness she was certain lay hidden beneath the facade of invulnerability. "He cannot be allowed to challenge our world," she whispered to Kiba. "And if he touches the throne, everything we have known will crumble." Kiban's mind whirred with calculations. "Even gods have limits," he said softly, "and even gods can be provoked." Across the narrow sea, Daenerys considered her next move. Dragons circled above her, restless and uneasy in the shifting winds. The presence of Superman threatened to alter not only her ambitions, but the destiny she had meticulously planned. "He could be an ally," she said, voice low, "or he could be the obstacle I've feared all along. And we'll need to watch him closely, for his choices will shape the fate of this world." In the north, Superman faced a moral dilemma unlike any he had encountered. A rival lord had set a trap to claim territory, using villagers as bait. Jon and Arya warned him that interference could spark war. Superman arrived quietly, the snow swirling around him, his eyes glowing faintly. The soldiers froze mid-step, swords bending and shields cracking under invisible force. "Live," said, "harm no one again." The mercenaries fled, terror etched into their faces, their plans undone without bloodshed. Jon and Arya watched in silent awe. Superman's way was not the way of Westeros yet. It was effective and transformative in a way few could understand. That night, Jon spoke to Arya on the wall, watching the stars glitter coldly in the northern sky. "He is changing everything," Jon said, "not by fighting, but by existing. And that is a danger to everyone who thrives on fear and power." Arya's gaze was sharp, calculating. "Cersei will not stand idly by, neither will Daenerys. And Westeros may not survive someone who refuses its rules." High above, in the mountains and forests, ancient eyes watched. Old gods, spirits of the land, and creatures older than dragons stirred in the shadows, sensing the arrival of a being who could reshape destiny itself. Superman had entered a world governed by cruelty, ambition, and fire by simply choosing restraint. He had shifted the balance of power irrevocably. The pieces were moving. The kingdoms were restless. The dragons roared in the distance. And far to the south, Cersei's plotting deepened. Daenerys' watchfulness hardened, and every living soul in Westeros began to understand one truth. The Game of Thrones had changed, and no one, neither man, beast, nor dragon, could predict the next move. Superman stood alone atop a ridge, snow swirling around him, understanding the enormity of what lay ahead. To protect this land would demand more than strength, would demand patience, wisdom, and courage that could withstand betrayal, ambition, and ancient darkness. And every choice he made would echo across kingdoms, shaping destinies in ways that even he could not foresee. This storm was coming, and this time it would test not only the strength of men, but the very soul of Westeros. The tension in Westeros had reached a breaking point. Whispers of Superman's presence had traveled across every kingdom, stirring hope, fear, and ambition in equal measure. Lords argued behind closed doors, queens plotted in shadowed halls, and dragons circled the skies, sensing a force that rivaled even their power. Jon Snow rode through the north, Ghost at his side, his thoughts heavy. "This world is fragile," he said quietly to Superman. "Even the smallest spark can ignite a war, and you are that spark." Superman's gaze swept across the forests below, the snow-covered hills, the villagers clinging to survival. I did not come to ignite war, he said. I came to prevent it. But Westeros is not a world where intentions matter. Only choices do. Arya watched silently, needle at her side, her eyes sharp and calculating. And your choices will be tested, she said. Not just by armies, not just by dragons, but by the hearts of men. Some will embrace you, some will fear you, and some will try to destroy you. Far to the south, Cersei Lannister's obsession had become almost palpable. Every day brought reports of Superman's actions, villagers saved, raiders defeated, innocents protected, and each tale fueled both her fear and her determination. He cannot touch the Iron Throne, she said to Qyburn. If he does, everything we know will end. The people will follow him, and kings will die trying. Qyburn's smile was cold. Even gods have weaknesses, he said. We must be patient, Your Grace. The right moment will come, and when it does, Westeros will bend to our will. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen observed the northern lands, dragons circling overhead, restless in the shifting winds. She could feel the rising power of Superman, a force that could rival fire and blood alike. He is unlike any I have faced, she murmured. He could challenge everything I've built, or become the ally I never expected. Westeros is a currency I cannot afford. In the north, Superman faced his greatest moral test yet. A band of mercenaries, emboldened by greed and fear, had captured villagers, using them as bait to seize territory. Jon and Arya urged caution, warning that any misstep could spark widespread conflict. Superman descended into the snow-drenched courtyard, his presence alone freezing the aggressors in place. Swords twisted mid-air, arrows bent, shields cracked. The mercenaries looked on in terror, powerless and awed. Leave, Superman said, his voice calm yet absolute. Harm no one again. The mercenaries fled, leaving the villagers unharmed. Jon and Arya watched in silence, comprehension dawning. Superman's power was unlike anything Westeros had seen, not merely physical strength, but the authority to enforce justice without cruelty. In a world ruled by blood and betrayal, such a force was both miraculous and terrifying. That night, atop Winterfell's walls, Jon spoke quietly to Arya. He changes everything, not through war, but through existence, and that is frightening. To those who built kingdoms on fear and ambition, Arya's eyes narrowed. Cersei will act, Daenerys will act, and the rest, they will have no choice but to respond. Westeros is not kind to saviors. High above, ancient forces stirred. The old gods whispered in the trees, dragons roared in the skies, and shadows of creatures older than men shifted in the night. They sensed a being who could challenge the natural order, a force that could protect, save, and yet remain untouchable by fear or ambition. Superman stood atop a ridge, snow swirling around him, understanding the immense responsibility he bore. To save this land, he could not rely on strength alone. He would need wisdom, patience, and the ability to navigate the fragile hearts of mortals. Every choice would echo across kingdoms, shaping destinies and challenging the very fabric of Westeros. The Game of Thrones had entered its most dangerous phase, and this time, the pieces included a player who did not seek power, but whose actions could decide the fate of all. Winterfell was silent under the pale glow of a full moon, snow crunching softly beneath boots and paws. Superman stood atop the highest tower, surveying the land he had come to protect, a land both brutal and beautiful, where hope was fragile and fear was a constant companion. Every decision, every act of mercy, every intervention had shifted Westeros in ways no one could have predicted. Jon Snow approached, his breath visible in the cold night air. "They're gathering, Superman," he said. "Cersei's forces, the southern lords who serve her, and Daenerys is coming north with dragons. This world doesn't respond to mercy the way you do." Superman's eyes scanned the horizon, distant fires flickering along the valleys and forests. "Then I must be more than mercy. I must be the example they cannot ignore. But I will not rule, and I will not destroy without cause. If Westeros is to survive, its people must choose their path, even if it is a path I guide but do not dictate." Arya emerged from the shadows, needle gleaming faintly. "And some choices will be harder than others. Some will force you to confront the darkness of men, and even your strength may not be enough to sway them." Far to the south, Cersei Lannister's obsession had become dangerous. She had marshaled her armies, enlisted dark sorcery, and plotted betrayals in shadowed halls. She believed she could outmaneuver this godlike figure, yet every plan seemed to crumble before his presence. Her fear had become a catalyst for chaos, forcing her into desperate measures that would soon collide with destiny. Daenerys, aboard her ship with dragons circling above, watched the northern lands. She understood now that the man in blue was unlike any force she had faced. He did not bend, he did not yield, yet he did not conquer. And that paradox, more than any army or dragon, unsettled her. As the sun rose over Winterfell, a battle began, not of swords and shields, but of ideals and wills. Cersei's armies advanced cautiously, while Superman moved with calm precision, protecting villages and innocents in his path. The clash was unlike any Westerosi conflict. Fear and awe rippled through the soldiers, many surrendering or fleeing rather than striking. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. Dragons soared above, wings slicing the sky, their fire lighting the frost. Daenerys approached, ready to confront this anomaly. Yet as her eyes met Superman's, something passed between them, recognition of purpose, of responsibility, of the possibility of change. She hesitated, realizing that force alone could not win against a force that demanded more than power. It demanded conscience. Cersei, furious at being denied even the illusion of control, retreated into plotting. Her schemes were undone by a force that did not act out of ambition, but out of moral clarity. Westeros was witnessing something unprecedented. The presence of a hero who could inspire loyalty, fear, hope, and even rebellion, not by conquest, but by action and restraint. In the quiet aftermath, when the smoke cleared and the fields lay still beneath the snow, the people of Westeros looked upon a man who walked among them like a guardian from another world. He had faced armies without slaughter, dragons without domination, and treachery without retaliation. And yet, he remained vigilant, understanding that the survival of this land depended not on a god, but on the choices of its people. Jon Snow approached Superman one last time, eyes reflecting the weight of what they had witnessed. "You've changed this world," he said softly, "not by killing, not by ruling, but by showing us what it means to protect without destroying." Superman looked toward the horizon, where the sun glimmered over snow and forest. "This world is harsh," he said. "It is shaped by fire and blood, by ambition and fear. But even here, there is hope. And as long as hope exists, so does the chance for change." Arya, standing beside them, smiled faintly. "And you will be the reminder that even in a land built on betrayal, mercy, courage, and justice can survive." The Game of Thrones had not ended. Kings would rise and fall, dragons would soar, and darkness would always lurk in the corners of Westeros. But now, a new force existed, one that reminded the people that power could be tempered by conscience. Strength could coexist with mercy, and even in the coldest, harshest lands, a hero could walk among men and leave a lasting light. Superman looked down upon the lands he had vowed to protect, feeling the weight of a world both fragile and resilient. And as the wind swept across the snow, he knew this. He was no king, no conqueror, no tyrant. He was a guardian, a symbol, a reminder that even in the deadliest game, hope could endure. The pieces of Westeros would continue to move. The storms would rage, betrayals would strike, and dragons would fly. But one truth had been etched into the very heart of the world. A dragon among wolves could stand, could protect, and could inspire without ever taking a crown. And for the first time in ages, the people of Westeros glimpsed the future where hope and strength walked hand in hand, where a man from another world became a legend not by dominating, but by showing them the possibility of something greater. The snow lay heavy over Winterfell, blanketing the land in a silence that felt unnatural after the chaos that had swept through Westeros. Superman stood atop the highest tower, his cape frozen briefly by the icy wind, eyes scanning the horizon as the first rays of dawn pierced the pale grey clouds. Below, the small folk began to stir, cautiously emerging from the safety of their homes. For them, the man in blue had become a symbol, a guardian who had come not to conquer but to protect. And yet, even as they whispered his name with awe and reverence, fear lingered, because in a world defined by betrayal, even the greatest savior could be seen as a threat. Jon Snow approached, footsteps soft on the frost-crusted stone. "Ghost," padded silently at his side, nose twitching as he sensed the tension in the land. "They've never seen anything like you," Jon said quietly, his voice almost lost to the wind. "Not the North, not the South. You've changed everything. Not through force, but through the example you've set, and that terrifies them." Superman's gaze swept across the frozen forests and the villages scattered beneath Winterfell. "I came to save, not to rule," he said softly, almost to himself. "But saving a land like this, it's not just about stopping harm. It's about teaching people, showing them that strength can exist without cruelty, that courage can exist without fear. Yet Westeros, this land has never known mercy as a weapon before." Arya emerged from the shadows, her face pale in the early light, needle glinting faintly. "You forced them to reconsider what power really means," she said. "Cersei, Daenerys, even the lords of the North. None of them can simply crush you, and that is dangerous for them. The world doesn't accept someone who can inspire hope without taking a throne." Far to the south, King's Landing had grown restless. Cersei's paranoia had reached its peak, her obsession bordering on madness. Reports of Superman's deeds had seeped through the cracks of her spies and courtiers, each tale igniting both fear and fascination. She had mobilized her armies, consulted Qyburn on poisons, dark magic, and strategies, yet every plan crumbled before the truth of his presence. A man who could protect without dominating, who could inspire without demanding obedience. He cannot be allowed to claim the Iron Throne, she whispered to herself, pacing the dimly lit halls of the Red Keep. "If he stands unchecked, he will undo everything I have built, and all of Westeros will follow him." Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen felt the shifting winds of the north tug at her heart. Dragons circled overhead, wings slicing the stormy sky, sensing the presence of a being who rivaled fire, blood, and the storms she had endured. Superman's actions disrupted the delicate balance of power she had long worked to control. He could be an ally, or he could be the force that prevents me from ever achieving the destiny I have sought, she murmured, watching the horizon, weighing the morality, restraint, and unyielding strength that radiated from him. The air in Westeros seemed to hold its breath. Ancient forces stirred in the forests and mountains, old gods whispering through the trees, shadows moving in ways that only creatures older than dragons could comprehend. They sensed the arrival of someone who defied natural order, a being whose power exceeded that of any king, dragon, or army, but who refused to wield it as Westeros expected. The land itself seemed to test him, measuring whether this stranger could survive, not just the men and dragons, but the very essence of Westeros itself, and Superman. He felt it all. The weight of every life, every choice, every village saved, or harmed, pressing down with gravity heavier than any planet he had ever known. In his world, the stakes had always been cosmic threats of galactic annihilation, alien invasions, supervillains with ambitions to destroy entire cities. Yet here, in Westeros, every action was intertwined with the fragile hearts of mortals, with the ambitions and betrayals that had shaped centuries. To intervene recklessly would bring chaos. To hesitate would allow suffering. And to act with wisdom required a patience that few beings, mortal or divine, could sustain. He remembered the villagers whose homes he had saved, the children whose tears he had wiped away, the raiders who fled in fear rather than bloodshed. He remembered Jon Snow's words, Arya's cautious admiration, and even the glint of curiosity or obsession in the eyes of Cersei and Daenerys. He realized that the true battle was not fought with fists or fire, but with choices. Every moment became a test. Could he preserve life without domination, enforce justice without tyranny, and inspire hope without claiming power? And yet, even in this challenge, there was clarity. Superman understood that he was not a king, not a conqueror, not a god in the eyes of men. He was a guardian. His mission was not to bend Westeros to his will, but to guide it, to show that mercy could exist amidst cruelty, that courage could survive amidst fear, and that even in a land hardened by betrayal, hope could endure. As the sun rose fully over Winterfell, painting the snow and forests with golden light, the people below looked upward. Warriors, villagers, and children alike paused, sensing the presence of someone extraordinary. Dragons roared in the distance, armies shifted uneasily, and the wind carried whispers of change across the land. Superman hovered above it all, neither king nor god, yet more powerful in influence than any ruler Westeros had ever known. Jon Snow stood beside him, voice quiet but reverent. "You've changed this world," he said, "not with power, but with the way you carry it, not by ruling, but by protecting. You've forced us all to rethink what it means to survive, to lead, to be human." Arya's eyes gleamed with recognition. "You've reminded us that even in a land built on betrayal and blood, there can be honor, courage, and hope. You've become more than a hero, you're a symbol." High above, the ancient powers of Westeros watched silently. Dragons, spirits, and old gods all recognized a truth they had long avoided. A being had entered their world who could bend destiny not by fear or conquest, but by example. And in doing so, he had reshaped the very rules of the game, proving that even in a world ruled by ambition, hope could survive. That Game of Thrones had not ended. Kings would rise and fall, dragons would roar, and darkness would always lurk in shadowed corners. Yet one constant now existed, a guardian among them. A man from another world, a dragon among wolves. He had reminded Westeros that strength and mercy could coexist, that power without cruelty was possible, and that even in the coldest, deadliest lands, a hero could walk among men and leave a legacy brighter than any crown. And as the wind swept across the snow-drenched lands, carrying whispers of hope to every corner of the north, Superman knew this truth with certainty. The survival of Westeros would depend not on who sat on the Iron Throne, not on who wielded fire or steel, but on the choices people made, inspired by courage, conscience, and the reminder that even in the darkest game, hope could endure. For, in the heart of a world built on betrayal and blood, a dragon among wolves had arrived, and Westeros would never be the same.